line. Scarred here. Sorry, you guys get I don't think there's anything that doesn't get stolen. Yeah, both same time. I wasn't thinking like a criminal.
Good evening. I'd like to call the General Plan Working Group meeting to order for Thursday, May 4th, 2023. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chairman Walt Stanish,
Here.
Vice Chair Lisa Hetchman, absent. Edwin Okamura,
Here.
Tom Donnelly,
Here.
Emmett Holtzlander,
Here.
Judith Adamson, Art Darden,
Here.
Rick Dolk,
Here.
Lisa Duke.
Can you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to open up for public comment. There's nobody here. Is there anybody online?
I have no one online.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Action items, approval of the April 6th, 2023 minutes. Do we have a motion to do that?
I have one minor edit, I think.
Okay,
Under the 4.2, it says, and it was mentioned last week, but I don't think that's how it's actually referenced. It says further discussion was made on the Japanese Asian grape site. And the only one I've ever heard it called is Chinese, but I think if you just make it Asian, then I think it'd be fine.
thank you. Anything else?
I'll make a motion. We approve the minutes as amended.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Okay,
Chairman Walt Stanish,
yes.
Edwin Okamura,
Yes.
Tom Donnelly,
Yes.
Emmett Holtzlander,
Yes.
Judith Adamson. Yes. Art Darden.
Yes.
All right, we're on to discussion 4.1, draft land use element. Paul, you're up.
Thank you, sir. Let the presentation come up here. Good evening, Paul Yunker, planning team for the general plan. This evening, you can go ahead and next slide. This evening, we are going to continue working through the elements. This is the process we'll be going through with each meeting. We're going to go over the draft land use element. It's been provided to the commission and we'll look for comments on that. And then we'll talk about the open space, conservation goals, policies, and programs. We will have a quick discussion of the land use map because there's a little bit of new information that we want to share with you. It's only a minor change to the map, but we want to make you aware of some discussions that are going on. And then we'll be providing you a brief update on the circulation element. Next slide. So the land use element, I'm going to ask Nick Pergakis on our team to walk through this, and I'll be taking notes as we go through, as well as answering any questions that arise. So Nick?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Coming through well.
Great. So as Paul mentioned, we'll be going over the draft land use element and getting some of your feedback this evening. We did provide that to you in your packet to review, and hopefully you had a chance to review the document. And for this evening, we're looking to see if the important themes and values related to land use in the city have been reflected in the draft element, and also the format, the presentation, the level of the detailed writing and things that we have in there are consistent with the expectations of the general plan working group. So next slide, please. So the draft land use element, we've been working on that for a few months now. I know you've had seen some components of that, but then we've expanded on the element, including several new topic areas for your view, including community character. So features of the city that the citizens of Rio Vista value and how they contribute to the town's character and identity. We have a section regarding future land use and development patterns, looking at some of the challenges and some of the things that we're going to be seeing over the next several years, including the Flannery Group and the properties that they've been acquiring surrounding the city, and how that poses challenges for development in the city and around the city, and how that will really focus new development to occur, within the city limits mostly today. So also looking at land uses in the city, this is a work in progress, kind of identifying what the existing uses and some of the information that we'll include in the general plan land use element. So we're working on that. Development projections, which we have talked about in past general plan working group meetings. We have a section looking at projections for residential and employment growth, looking at where we are today in terms of development for residential employment, and then how that could change with future land use patterns and changes in the city in the year 2045. So looking at some projections for those two items. And then also have a section on waterfront area and the downtown area, and what those areas look like today, and then how that could change, and what are the aspects of those areas that we want to keep, maintain, enhance, and how that will change in the future. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of an overview of what's in the land use element, and then have you give Paul and the team your comments and your thoughts on the section or element of the general plan.
Just a couple of clarifying points to what Nick has shared on the land uses today. What we're really going to be doing is an inventory of what's on the ground, not what's designated residential, but what really is residential, what's vacant. And then we start to get a sense of what capacity there is to accommodate new development. So this isn't really a mapping exercise as much as trying to figure out really where we're at today. So that will be helpful in, understanding our ability to grow and expand. And then development projections. These are what we believe to be reasonable projections based upon historic growth in Rio Vista, as well as what we've seen in other communities. There's plenty of land to accommodate the projected development through 2045. At some point, we will get down to talking about what the ultimate holding capacity of the city will be. It will exceed the numbers that we're seeing in the projections. Those are based on how many houses have we been building per year over the last 20 years or so. and then just projecting that out. And then candidly, the employment numbers are optimistic. If we can hit the projected employment growth, I think everybody would be very pleased. So just those additional comments. We're interested in now the working group's comments on the element, and hopefully you can provide some direction to help us make it an even better document.
I have some comments about, are we at the wordsmithing point?
We absolutely are.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so shall I just go ahead?
Yeah, and to whatever extent, if you can cite like maybe a page or a
Yes.
paragraph, and that'll help our notes.
Okay, page 1, second paragraph under introduction. I think providing goods is what you want instead of good. Second line, second paragraph. Under community character, same page, the second bullet, about 4 lines down. Delta provides recreational opportunities that could draw tourists. I mean, does it really draw tourists now? Or should it be could? Page 2, third bullet down from the top. How about currently Rio Vista is a divided community with Highway 12 not only bisecting the historic core itself, but separating undeveloped Riverwalk project and the more recent trilogy in Liberty neighborhoods. To me, it's important that core itself is divided.
One moment, I'm gonna just go ahead and open up live the Word document. I'm going to open up live the Word document because I'm taking notes and I want to make sure I understand exactly where the changes are. So 1 second.
All right.
Okay, could you repeat the last comment
Yes, bullet 2.
on
On
page?
page 2.
Okay,
Currently, Rio Vista is a divided community with Highway 12, not only bisecting the historic core itself, but separating undeveloped Riverwalk project and the more recent trilogy in Liberty neighborhoods.
I think that's great wording. I'm going to ask that we pick that up afterwards because I want to make sure I get it from you correctly.
Okay,
So I'll
okay.
just put a note to receive your comment afterwards.
Okay. Page 2, under C, the second and third paragraphs. To me, it sounds like it's a repeat sentence almost, starting with if the new buildings are designed to be sensitive. And then on the following paragraph, the last sentence, encouraging a mixture of interesting architectural styles. So I guess the question would be, is there, should those be combined somehow? In paragraphs under future land use 2 and 3, a couple of those sentences, should they be combined?
And this is the paragraph balancing future growth.
Yes,
Okay, so I will review that for repetition and clean it up.
okay. Page 3. Am I crazy? But isn't the land surrounding Rio Vista from the southeast near the Sacramento River, not southwest? And to the northwest beyond the Rio Vista Municipal Airport.
Where are we
At the
still?
very top of the page, page 3.
Okay,
Shouldn't southwest be southeast? Yeah,
sorry, now I'm trying to get oriented. So
right.
it would be south, yeah, it would be southwest, yes, that's right. Okay,
Okay. Um, Page 5. The last paragraph, land use diagram, seems to be somewhat repeated on page 7. In that first paragraph on page 7, the general plan land use diagram versus the updated general plan and land use map
Which
So-
paragraph on page 7 should I be looking
of
at?
the top paragraph.
Okay, we'll,
So
We'll
just
take
check
it.
those out, see if
Yep.
it's a repetition.
got it.
Mhm. There's something, page 9, under North Waterfront. The first sentence, there's something off to me and I can't figure out what it is. I think it, so the North Waterfront designation includes lands within the adopted waterfront specific plan, as well as the existing city hall to the south replaces portion of land designated downtown. There's something
No,
missing there and I can't,
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know what it is,
No,
something.
there was, yeah.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing is a remnant when we were talking about how we've changed the designations over time. It's just, it's no longer relevant. We want to talk about the designation. So good eye. Thank you.
Page 12. LU2, top of the page. And enhance Rio Vista's, you have to take the apostrophe out. Or give it a, Rio Vista's what? To maintain and enhance Rio Vista. It should be, right? Or it should be
I'm just getting to
Revista's
page
character.
12. So where?
LU2. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Got it?
down at the bottom of that same page 12, policy LU5. Require the use of high quality, environmentally sound or environmentally sensitive materials.
That's kind of planner speak and maybe it isn't well understood in the broader world. It's just, use brick, use durable materials. So that's intended. But if that's not coming through, then we need to change the language.
I mean, you can have high quality, but it might not be very environmentally sound.
Okay, so the addition of environmentally,
I would like to see that in there.
so say it again, the high quality,
Require the use of high quality, environmentally sound materials. Or is that something that the state would naturally dictate that it has to be environmentally?
no, not,
Okay.
materials are more regulated at the local government level. There are certain limitations as far as minimum safety, but I think it's a reasonable comment.
Okay. Page 13, at the bottom, program LU2. Facilitate development of public uses in the South Waterfront District. Is that synonymous with the Army base?
It's the Army base and an expanded area.
Okay, so that expanded area also possibly would have hazardous materials.
The hazardous materials are associated with the Army base.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it just seems to me that the first bullet point, to determine the presence of hazardous waste materials at the Army base, perhaps it should be instead of the whole district. I think I'm almost done. I'm on it.
Yeah, I think in this case, we're trying not to use the name Army base a whole lot, but,
Okay,
but
alright.
if it's associated with a negative like hazardous materials, that's
Okay,
That's okay.
Gotcha.
probably a good distinction.
okay. So this doesn't seem to have a page number, but it's about 4 pages beyond that. Policy OSC 6 is. the
Okay,
top of the
that would be into the next element, so let's hold those thoughts.
You should
Well,
have told me
what-
to go.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Do you use the buzzword sustainable, environmentally sustainable?
That's good. Yeah, I was looking for that. I think.
Sure.
Better than sensitive.
Big buzzword today.
It's a good buzzword.
Environmentally sustainable rather than environmentally sound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Got it? Wow, is everybody
No.
gonna give me that much?
I have a couple comments. Actually, some are just questions.
Okay,
On page 5, when we talk about floor area ratio. FAR, I was just wondering where these numbers come from, and is it just standard industry or standard language or percentage of lot that's been used? Is it restrictive? Is it non-restrictive? How would you?
it's a very
define it?
commonly used term because what it gets to is the amount of building floor area on a particular site. So if you have an FAR of 0.5, you could have a one-story building that covers half the site. You could have a
Right.
two-story building that covers a quarter of it.
No, I understand that part.
Yeah.
I'm asking whether the percentage of coverage is that fairly standard? Or how would you?
We determine the percentage of coverage
Mhm.
in each district. So that's where it's either restrictive or not. If we have a
Right.
very low FAR, then we're saying you can't build a whole lot per acre if we have very
Right.
high, but
Mhm.
it's on a district by district use. And so the general plan establishes intensity.
Right,
by
and
that
I
measure.
recognize that as well, but I'm just asking in general, how does that compare to other cities and how they do it? Or is it roughly the same as what other cities use for percentage of coverage or lot coverage?
There's two different measures, and typically you'll see lot coverage within the zoning code,
Mhm.
and you'll see building intensity or FAR in the general plan, and that's a very common approach.
Okay. All right, thank you. Just as a nitpick, under residential estate,
What page? is it?
page 7,
Thank you.
it has the maximum density to, oh shoot, I covered it up, 2 dwelling units per acre.
Yes,
Just put a parenthesis DU because I don't think we have DU. The acronym it's used later on, like under at the bottom of the page said maximum density FAR 7.5 DU per acre, and I assume you're meaning dwelling unit, right?
Mhm.
yeah.
So we
we'll-
just need to
yeah,
define
I
it.
got
right?
it, yeah, because it's not called out and then it's used, yeah.
Right, and then ADUs on page 8. We talk about ADUs, it says, and then under historic residential, it talks about ADUs and it says a maximum density of 20 dwelling units per acre for residential uses. Are the dwelling units included in that? When we talk about densities, state mandates that people are allowed to build ADUs on their property. Is that in addition to what our densities are?
Yes, the ADUs would not count towards maximum density, nor would
Okay.
they count towards maximum lot coverage under state
Okay,
law.
got it. Thank you. And then under South Waterfront, which is page 9, I just want to be extra clear because I know there's been a lot of talk about this on the deed restrictions. And I know that you added under that paragraph, South Waterfront, the hotels or restaurants. There's another piece that I'd like to have added in there. And I know that you said this wasn't a comprehensive list, but I think it's important is conference and meeting facilities. That's under the deed as allowable. That was it.
Okay, so I've now added such as conference and meeting facilities, comma, hotels or restaurants. Was that the intent? Okay, got it. Great, good comments. Next.
I just as we're going through this, I've just noticed a couple of things on starting on page 8. Under the maximum density FAR, in some cases you spelled out DU/acre. And then in a few cases, it's DU/ACE, and then in one case, it's DU/AC. They're just not
Yeah.
consistent.
DU ACE, okay, yeah. So
I don't know if
we'll,
that's- Didn't think that was a different term.
No.
but-
so we'll get those all consistent. Good eye, thank you. Additional comments?
Yeah, I didn't see education, and I've brought this up previously. I keep looking at how can we do things differently in the future to encourage growth and bring new blood to town to come and spend money in our and keep our commercial and retail downtown area vibrant. And I keep reading things about skills training, and where you would go to take skills classes for a 6-month, 9-month period. And that seems to be a growing thing from what I'm reading. And I'm just wondering if we could do something there. It would bring 20-somethings to town to develop skills in particular areas that they can then go out in the world and sell. And while they're here, they could have short-term, whether it's apartment houses, or I've seen apartment living in that area. I've also seen mobile homes and that type of stuff where they come in, they're here for 6 to 9 months while they're going through training, and then they go off. But during that 6 to 9 months, they're here spending their money in the community.
Some type of academy, vocational college. something.
Exactly, yes.
Career tech center. or
So
something like that.
we certainly can allow that
Well,
use.
that's what, and we've had that discussion before about allowing it, and I just think it should be mentioned
As a priority of the
as,
city.
well as an option. Because right now, if I were to read through what we've produced, I don't see that. If I was coming in from the outside and trying to read this, it would not be an option. I would maybe go look somewhere else.
Let us look for a place where we can reference that. It might be in development patterns or something like that in the land use element, but I think it also would be very relevant in the economic development element itself. Probably as a concept belongs there more in more detail. So we'll look for a place to reference in land use and then give it more treatment in economic development. So
That's fine.
okay. Next,
I had a question. Maybe completely irrelevant, but hey, that's what we do here. So, and I think it's important that we talk about that we have this outside group that's buying property and kind of closing us in, right? And we specifically name, we put the name Flannery in there. I guess 2-part question. Do we run into any kind of legal ramifications if we have sort of Flannery under a negative light in our general plan? And B, should we make it more vague? Because Flannery is kind of a bogus name anyway, right? They just name themselves after a street that they bought land on. And my guess is 10 years from now, they probably won't even be known as Flannery, but that's speculation at best. But would it make more sense to just say an outside group buying land, or what does the group think on that? I'm just talking out loud here. Is there any legal issues you see with that, Paul?
I don't think there's any legal issues because they've identified themselves as Flannery. They are major property owners. All of that's well documented. So, and I don't think we're necessarily casting them in a negative light. We're saying they're a reality. But none of that responds to the question of should we be naming them by name? I don't think it's a legal issue, but maybe we don't want to. And I had a little twinge of that myself as this was being written. So I'd really appreciate the thoughts and the guidance of the group.
Well, if we keep the name Flannery, then we probably need to give it a definition, and I think that's probably more what Rick is trying to say. Because we know what Flannery is now. 20 years from now, they may not know what that means. So if we're going to use Flannery in here, then we need to give it a definition, I think. And if we don't use Flannery, then we still need to define it somehow as a land grabbing facility.
Just remember you're being
Why don't we just-
recorded.
I
don't we just-
understand. In 20 years, I'm probably not going to worry about it.
Why don't we just say large landowner?
Land developer.
Yeah,
No,
well, we don't know if they're a
Oh, fair
developer. We just know a landowner,
Yeah.
right? They're just a landowner.
Or land acquisition company.
Yeah, that's a good way
Yeah.
to put it.
Yeah.
It is identified on the bottom of page 2 as a private land acquisition group.
Yeah, the name's really irrelevant in the whole thing. It's that they own the land. That's the important part.
Yeah.
The name Flannery doesn't have
Completely agree.
anything. to do-
Flannery has no particular value in noting it, but I think that the distinction that this is not your average landowner. The distinction is that we have no indication that this group will develop or allow development of any land around Rio Vista. In fact, to the contrary, it looks very unlikely. So that then leads us in certain directions. If we don't explain that, then to say that there's a big landowner seems to leave an important part of the story out.
No, a large landowner that doesn't appear to have any intentions of developing the land.
I think that's
I don't-
fine. And I agree. I suspect Flannery is, for lack of a better term, a throwaway name. Not really relevant to whatever the core interests of this group are. So, and I have no problem taking that out. I just want to make sure that we explain the nature of there's
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
very large landowner that is going to constrain the city. Therefore, we're looking inward. That's, I think,
Yeah,
the
and that's
story
fine.
that we want to tell.
Yes.
Okay. So happy to, it seems like consensus. Let's just drop the title and refer to them more by how they're functioning than by a name. Okay.
Lag.
There you go.
Another acronym.
Patent it.
Let's make it a
Copyright it.
really onerous acronym. if we're- Okay, other comments? Really?
Okay,
This is a different group than the last meeting.
I'm gonna, one more, the Army base. I really would like us not to use the word the Army base. We need to be referring to that as some other, because we all know it as the Army base. But it's always the old Army base that is out there falling apart with weeds, overgrown with weeds. That's the image that everybody that talks about it is in their mind. Let's call it the South Waterfront. Let's call it something else, because 20 years from now, hopefully it is still not an old buildings falling down, overgrown with weeds, but it is something nice.
A former military installation. That's the
Is it in
home,
there?
or just
Well,
say the South Waterfront, which includes.
I believe the only reference is that now we're referring to a site with hazardous materials. And so we've reintroduced. So would you be comfortable with contamination associated with former military operations, something, just
Something, yes.
don't use Army base.
Just old Army base just has an image that I would love for us to get away from.
Group?
Negative connotations.
Yes.
bad, association with a newcomer.
I think we've heard this sentiment, we're trying to turn a corner and move somewhere other than where we've been for 20 years. So,
Military.
yeah, and I think that would still identify that it's a limited geographic area and not the whole south waterfront.
So what are we gonna call it?
TMI.
Yeah. We'll put it in the glossary,
VCMI.
CMI.
Very conjecture.
Yeah.
The Flannery Center.
The Flannery base.
All right. Any other last comments? As always, you're going to have these documents. If you find yourself with a little time to read back through them, come up with more suggestions, more improvements, the very close read, Judith, very much appreciated. So it just makes the document better, but as always, this document is live until adopted by council, and then it's live as soon as we want to amend it, so. Okay, Nick, let's see, let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Huh, that's interesting. So, the issue that I want to bring to the group's attention is we have had ongoing discussions and continuing discussions with the Delta Protection Commission, Delta Preservation Commission. And that group has an obligation to review general plan amendments, land use approvals in the area identified as the Delta primary zone. So they will need to make a determination of consistency of our general plan with a document called the Delta Plan. The boundaries of the primary zone were established by the state legislature. They're not going to change easily. And we probably are not the only agency that would look at the boundaries and say, gosh, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We've talked about what it would take to amend the boundaries and are convinced it's not worth the level of effort that would be involved and the likelihood of success. So where is the primary zone? It follows Airport Road. Everything north and east of Airport Road is within the Delta primary zone. We invited commission staff out to look at the property and to demonstrate that it's been mined, it's been turned into a landfill, it's been raised and leveled, it's been developed. A lot of things have happened, and that seems not compelling to the commission. Their position is it's in the primary zone, and we are uncomfortable with certain things that are proposed by the city. So the first change that occurred is the land that is immediately north of, I believe it's St. Francis, and this always messes me up. So northwest of St. Francis, northeast of Airport Road. I wish pointers worked on this screen, but it had been designated residential. So maybe starting out at the river is the easiest way to describe this. At the river, the working group has designated new residential lands. So we have the mobile home park, we have some apartments, and we have some single family residential that's all down by the river. And then there's some vacant land as you move away from the river, some developed with industrial uses, and the working group has designated that as residential. I believe that is going to be problematic for the commission. So this is a heads up that we haven't changed it yet, but that seems to be an area that is giving the commission significant concerns.
For what reason?
Are you talking about North Waterfront, the pink area?
No, North Waterfront is not in the Delta primary zone, not at east.
The gray, right before the dark gray triangle.
Everything above Airport Road.
That, that turquoise looking colors?
This area here
Oh,
is our first area of concern.
okay.
This is currently not residential uses. What I would say is this entire area heading out is designated study zone under the current general plan. So we're taking land that's.
That's a trailer park though, so it is residential right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of area that is. But
You're
not
saying
all.
it's
I-
not, but
I-
it is.
So let me back up. The commission starts to get uncomfortable when we change general plan designations. I'm not sure, but I believe if we leave designations alone, then their consistency determination should be moved. We're not changing it. I'm not 100% sure of that. So we're still trying to find out the edges of what the commission's going to ask of us. We explained that there are residential uses that exist today. And I believe that they would be fine with us designating those existing residential uses as residential in our general plan. The explanation was, look, we've got Dutra, they exist. We've got industrial uses, they exist. We have housing, they exist. They're in our city limits, so we just want to designate them what they are. I believe that they will accept those. Not 100% sure. As we move up Airport Road, there's vacant land and industrial land that is not currently residential that the working group has said we would like to see the residential continue up. I think that the commission will have reservations about that. So that's an area we're still in discussions.
So, and that's the reason why when you move up from the river, that area that's in the turquoise, I think a portion along airport was going to be residential and you're suggesting that it should stay open space. Is that it?
We've already, yes, the working group had said we want to see residential continuing on the north side, northeast side of airport. We've already removed that. And you had seen that in a previous iteration. We removed that for two reasons. One, it was very clear that was a hard no from the commission. But two, it's also land that's owned by the State Department of Water Resources. And the likelihood that they will ever release that land for private use is low. You know, they're just, that's not what state agencies do. They don't tend to let go of land unless there's a really compelling reason. So that seemed like an easy, let's not fight that battle. As you continue up, what you see is a red line that signifies the city limit. And there's more of that yellowish kind of color. It's yellowish to me, yellow-green. That is the city landfill property. And we wanted that to be open space natural resources because we think we'll be able to decommission that landfill and reclaim it as about 20 acres of, as about 20 acres of parkland for the city. So that's why you see some of that, that yellow, greenish yellow color. Moving further up Airport Road, you get to the gray, which is industrial. That's on one end is Airport Road self-storage. And then on the upper end is the drilling operation and another use. So we're fighting to retain that as industrial. We think that we'll be able to hang on to that as industrial because it's already designated industrial by the general plan. But that's again, an area that we're not exactly sure how aggressively the commission's going to push back. So we really are still working through these discussions. The light blue that you then see is public quasi-public. It's the airport and it's the city's wastewater treatment plant and associated city lands. The commission does not seem troubled by that because public facilities are a recognized use that can be appropriate in the Delta primary zone. So probably the light blue, not a problem. All of this is just really to put you on notice that we're working with the Delta Commission staff and waiting for their determination about where we're at. But it's turned out to be surprisingly challenging, in my opinion, considering having visited the site, highly disturbed. Disturbance is continuing. There's mining going on within the Delta primary zone. There's industrial uses. It's a little bit odd to me that we're having a discussion that's progressed this far, but that's where we're at. We have not yet gotten to the point where we think we have to ask the mayor to get a hold of somebody at the commission, but hopefully we won't reach that point. But we are making adjustments in order to try to let go of things that don't particularly hurt the city, but are very important to the commission.
So it sounds to me as what they're doing is they're trying to dictate to us what our general plan is, especially in this area.
They are stating that they must determine that the general plan is consistent with the Delta plan, and that is their legal obligation. So they must make, and we must request that they make a determination of consistency between our general plan and the Delta plan. And that is, they are charged to do that. So yes, it's not unlike the Airport Land Use Commission in that they must make determinations of consistency with the airport land use compatibility plan. So when we do a rezone or do a project, we go and present it to the commission and they have to give us our consistency determination. I'm not sure where this goes if they say we don't find it consistent. I'd rather not test those waters, but I guess we may at some point if we need to.
This commission is in Solano County.
No, it's multi-counties.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the I think the Delta touches 6 counties.
So,
It's a state agency.
so we just submitted our housing element and that was, and we have RENA numbers in there and it was based on the land and what the uses were. Was this already taken out and accounted for? Because we had some residential along the airport. Was that factored into the housing element?
That land was not counted in
It
our
wasn't.
RENA inventory, so it has no effect on the housing
Okay.
element.
Yeah, you had mentioned a little earlier that we probably have enough land for the housing that we need anyway. With this little bit being basically taken away, are we still good or?
We, I believe we have more land in the city than is needed to accommodate development for the next 20 years. At some point, the city will build out.
Yeah.
And that sometime is a lot sooner, given our boundaries can't expand. The 20-year horizon, I think it's very unlikely we would run out of land to develop.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're not only planning for 20 years.
I mean, I somewhat see where these guys are coming from because I remember a lot of that is in flood zone. Or it's approaching it very closely.
Yeah. I think the biggest concern from my perspective is to retain some of that light industrial vacant land for expanded employment growth, because we don't have a lot of vacant industrial land that, you know, the type that could be there that would not be troubling to adjacent residences. So I think probably from my perspective, I'm more interested in retaining the industrial than, you know, the housing. It would be nice to have it. It made sense from a planning perspective, but you know, we will not. I don't think there's any likelihood we'll get the land that's in the blue box that represents our sphere of influence. I think it's very unlikely the commission will make a determination. Keep in mind that there's cities all around the Delta that are chafing under the commission's regulations. And the requests and discussions that are coming from Rio Vista are requests and discussions they hear from agencies day after day. So there is a little bit, I think, of, I can't say yes to Rio Vista when I've said no to the last 6 agencies. So we'll keep working with them and try to differentiate why, this is a unique situation. It's unusual to have incorporated land within Delta primary zone. It's even more unusual to have incorporated land that's planned for an urban use that already has development in the primary zone. That's pretty unusual. So hopefully that will be taken into consideration.
So what I'm going to say is basically a rhetorical question, but they don't seem bothered by Flannery buying up all this land, and we're talking a little piece as opposed to what Flannery's got, and they've got to be in the Delta zone as well. And I know that they're not proposing any building at this point in time, but that doesn't seem to bother them.
They are,
It's a rhetorical
They-
question, so
they
it's
actually, we have both discussed the Flannery operation, which they are now actually certainly very interested in. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say they're terribly concerned, but it's definitely gotten their attention. They're also very interested in plans to do restoration, wetland restoration, just outside of the city limits, because that will convert agricultural land to mitigation lands. And probably their highest priority of the commission is preservation of agriculture. And so it's interesting that we have one state agency championing wetland restoration, and we have other state agencies that are saying, wait a minute, we're not sure that's consistent with our mission. So that's where we're at. But I felt like overall the primary staff member I'm working with at the commission is very open to dialogue. The staff has been working with us, and so we'll keep the working group apprised as these discussions go forward.
Okay.
So that's the land use map. Nick, it's going to come back to you for open space. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as was shared in, I believe, last general plan working group meeting, we have a slide just for review of, generally what a goal, policy, and program is, and how they're being used in the open space and conservation element. So a goal, as you all recall, is a high level desired outcome that the city would like to achieve. In this case, it's regarding open space and conservation of land. And we have policies written in the document that you've read and we're going over this evening. And that's a standard or direction applied in the decisions of a goal. And then in terms of programs, that's implementation measures or actions that will be required to achieve the goals and policies. So like last time, programs can require significant effort and, in terms of staff time and work. So we want to be just careful and judicious in how we lay those out in the document, and really focus on creating programs that are, going to create an impact and be beneficial to the community. So just moving forward tonight, we want to discuss and have your comments on the proposed draft open space and conservation document we provided you with the goals, policies, and programs. So we'll go over the goals on the next slide and the following slide after that. We'll just go through these pretty quickly, the first 6 goals, and then we'll get your feedback on these and your thoughts. So I won't read these word for word, but generally these are looking to preserve and protect natural resources in the city, preserving and protecting agricultural resources and agricultural soils in Rio Vista and around the city, trying to promote energy conservation and water conservation. Next slide. Goal 4, looking to preserve the rural landscape, in terms of view preservation and views of the hills and wetlands, waterfront areas. looking to preserve and protect biological resources for wildlife, and then also preserving and protecting cultural and historic resources in the city. So just want to ask your thoughts and see if you have any feedback on the 6 goals that we provided in this document.
We attempted to come up with a limited number of goals that captures those open space, natural resource factors, attributes of the community. So from agriculture to visual to cultural, water conservation, energy conservation. Have we overlooked anything?
So a couple meetings ago, council meetings ago, we had I forget the name of the commission on water come out here and talk about different options for us or ideas for water conservation. I'm just wondering if under that 3rd bullet, utilize energy and water resources wisely and to promote conservation. That's promoting, you know what? Never mind. I think it covers it.
Excellent, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Yeah.
These are, the high
It's pretty
level
high level.
umbrellas.
It's okay.
And then we'll get more specific in the policies and programs. Thoughts? Anything missing?
Just on that same bullet, the 3rd one, is it to promote conservation of energy and water resources or to promote conservation of open space? I don't know how to read that sentence. So to utilize energy and water resources wisely and for conservation of energy and water resources, or to promote conservation of open space?
The goal is about using energy and water wisely and conserving energy and water. So I understand now the dilemma. So we'll pull this one apart and just make it clear that it's about energy and water, power and water, and that we want to preserve those resources. Anything else on the goals?
Could we see the next? Thank you. On that first one, are we also trying to say that the residents' access to the hills, wetlands, and waterfronts, or just access to enjoying views of those? The way it is written, it is just to access to enjoy the views. And I think we would like them to have access to those things, as well as enjoyment of the
So
views.
simply strike enjoy views of. So provide residents access to the hills, wetlands, and waterfronts along the Sacramento River.
Please.
Okay. And that's number 4. Anything else?
Never been able to figure out if we should put the AL in the inspect. That's different connotations.
Well, that is interesting, particularly given cultural and historical. Let us look at that and think about what's correct. I have generally used the term historic resources, not historical resources, so, but the juxtaposition is a little bit curious. Anything else? All right. We could go to the next slide. Nick, can you start taking us through policies?
Yes. So, yeah. We have about 16 or 17 policies, so we have a few slides covering several of these here. The first one is working with public agencies, private organizations, and landowners to preserve and maintain open space resources in and around the city. We also have creating an integrated open space network within the city to link open space and natural habitat resources and recreation areas. We also have require all new development to provide direct or alternative linkages to existing and planned open space systems where feasible. And then protecting open space areas of natural resources and scenic value, including wetlands, riparian corridors, et cetera.
So can we go back, please? We're going to take these one slide at a time rather than flipping back and forth. So these policies relate in large part to the public having access, using, moving around in the community. So these are, the first policy is much broader in scope. The next three are, well, certainly the next two are trails related, and then the fourth is again just protecting open space resources. So thoughts?
On OS, the third one, policy 3. I just think it weakens it when we say where feasible. I think it's assumed. So I would just strike that if that makes sense.
Okay.
And if there is no existing or planned open space system in proximity to the project,
Well, then
Not-
it's not going to happen.
then it's not an issue. Okay, yeah. All right, so strike where feasible. Other comments? Which? I think I need other opinions because I think it may be correct like this and I may not be seeing it. So.
Areas. Basically. So that it doesn't move the resources.
Areas of natural resource and scenic value. I think it works. Having to do with rivers, and typically it's a riparian environment is a wooded river environment. Fairly limited in Rio Vista. Okay, not seeing anything else on this one. Let's move to the next set. So a couple more, Nick.
Okay, so policy 5 really regarding respecting, unique land features in the city and ensuring development respects those areas. And then having here, the city should require new development to be designed and constructed to preserve these, special types of areas and features in the city, including scenic and trail corridors, streams and riparian vegetation, wetlands, drainage corridors, and so on. So any thoughts on these two policies?
The group doesn't like feasible.
Yes.
Like feasible.
Okay. Well, I have the document open, so I'm making these changes in the,
Thank you, Nick.
yeah. Mhm.
I do have to say that I think both of these policies would have significantly more relevance if we were not constrained by the large landowners surrounding us.
Who is
If we
that?
were, the unnamed large landowner. If
Use
we were
the
going into Montezuma Hills, there's
Acronym,
there's drainages coming down, there's hills, there's landforms. The reality is that Brand Ranch has a little bit of topography. Sino has even less, so I think these are good policies, but of possibly of somewhat limited application in the city. So, but they're still good policies.
Right.
And we may, something could change with that large landowner. We may find we can expand outside of the city, or they may wish to develop, and then these would be good policies.
So are we striking feasible or not?
You guys are in charge.
I think we should strike it. I mean, obviously, if a developer wants to be snarky, they're just gonna say, well, it's not feasible every time.
Okay. You got that, Nick?
Yep, got it.
Also in 5, instead of wetland area, just wetlands.
Makes sense. You got that, Nick?
Mhm, got it.
Okay. Okay, next slide.
So the first policy is looking at how to, use native, non-native, requiring the use of native plant species that are drought resistant and conserving water in publicly owned landscape areas. And then the next two policies are regarding the natural gas well sites in the city. And policy 8 is really looking at requiring a phased development plan that includes a management plan for those areas and providing some attractive landscaping around the perimeter to help with those areas. And then policy 9 is looking at also requiring a plan for ultimate improvement of the area as either urban development or public lands for those sites with natural gas wells.
So a little bit of context here. On policy 7, it's just about using water conserving landscapes, native if possible, in all of our public landscapes because they're lower maintenance, lower water consumption, more suited to the environment. So that's just smart planning and smart planting instead of putting high water consumption, pretty plants in that then take lots of work and water. The other two, we bounced up against this, particularly in completion of the Liberty Phase 3 project. We actually have active wells sitting in neighborhoods and homes are being built around them. So I really wish we'd had a policy that would have helped guide us in that instance, because we've got these fenced in areas that are really unattractive and haven't really integrated into the neighborhood. So yeah, we may well have this situation in other areas. The good news is Brand Ranch has gained control over all well leases in the property, so we will not have an issue with gas sites in the Brand Ranch project. So, but those policies 8 and 9 just relate to our history with natural gas extraction.
There was no policy, trilogy has a policy, yeah. Very nicely landscaped around.
We were able to achieve some landscaping around the well site, but in the case of Liberty Phase 3, the mapping had already been approved. I only participated in the design of the homes and the landscapes. So we're left with kind of an odd situation, and it's particularly odd in that the owners of wells have a disincentive to close them off. It costs a couple $100,000 to decommission them, and it doesn't really cost anything to let them sit there and produce a little bit of natural gas. So we probably want to, as much as possible in all future projects, really try to get those wells closed off before development occurs, just as a matter of policy. It's that we shouldn't have wells in our neighborhoods, so. No comments on these, we'll move on.
Quick, Paul, was there a reason that those 8, 9 are separated?
Can we go back to
Would
it
it
now?
just be because if I put the two together, it just becomes 2 or
There are different concepts in these. Let Nick and I and Eunice, let us take a look at 8 and 9 and make sure that they're written as succinctly as possible. We may be able to condense or maybe tease out a little bit 8 and 9 to make sure that they're as clear as possible in the differences.
I had,
curious.
It might be, it's possible. So
and
we'll
I,
look at consolidating 8 and 9, Nick.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
great. And then I have I just tend to not like subjective words like attractive perimeter landscaping. Could that be better defined at some point? I mean, is the objective to basically disguise or hide the gas well from view?
I believe it is. So
Okay,
it
so
should
maybe
be a
we should
reference of
define it.
screening or visual
Yes.
screening versus.
Yeah. Because attractive doesn't, it's different to everyone.
So attractive landscaping that screens the view. We'll work on it,
Yeah.
but the key is screening. It really is about
Right.
visual screening. So,
Right.
okay. Okay, next.
So 2 policies here. First one is encouraging landowners and developers to respect the existing terrain and natural vegetation in sensitive areas. So preserving that as much as possible. And then policy 11 is requiring new development to mitigate wetland loss. So this may be a little bit long-winded, but this is trying to get to mitigating wetland loss in the community.
And policy number 11 is really reflective of what would be required under something called a 404 wetlands permit. And when you want to disturb wetlands or destroy wetlands, you have to go through a permitting process, and first choice is always avoidance, and where you can avoid, you minimize impacts, and where you impact, you compensate. So that's really very consistent with the permitting process administered by the Corps of Engineers.
Do you know what endangered species we have in our wetland areas or not? Has that been identified?
I believe in Rio Vista, it's primary plants.
It's
There's
plants.
certain plant species that are obligate to wetlands. But we'll be digging into that more with the element and also with the guidance from our CEQA consultant, who will be giving us more specifics on the biological resources.
Mosquitoes.
Policy 5 and policy 10 are very similar.
Can we go back to 5? And now go to 10? Yes, so I think, Nick, take a note that 5 and 10 can be consolidated. I think there's a little bit of different information in this, but and also, Nick, please make a note to check how we're going to be relying on the term sensitive areas, because that's a term in the current general plan. I'm not sure it'll be a term that we use going forward. But that is a specific meaning in the current general plan.
Okay.
Let's discuss that. Anything else through 11? Moving on.
Okay, the next three policies are looking to here again preserve and enhance the existing native riparian habitat. Also, in terms of public safety concerns, so removal of habitat for flood control or other public purposes may be able to happen, but generally want to preserve and enhance existing native riparian habitats. Looking at to effectively do site preparation and construction activities to minimize dust emissions and pollutant emissions, so that's not spreading to adjacent sites and adjacent areas in the city. And then requiring application of the analysis methods and thresholds recommended by the Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District as needed. Paul, you might have more experience with that last policy.
We actually just met with the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District this afternoon to talk about their permitting procedures, and they are a regulator, but they're also a resource to help us protect our local environment. So we will work with the district. I do have to say that as we've gone through this, and I'll ask the working group's indulgence that you give us some latitude to look for ways where we might be able to consolidate policies. I see now, looking at this, require new private public developments to preserve and enhance existing native riparian habitat. I just feel like, having gone through this review, that maybe we've already talked about that earlier. So if you'll allow us a little latitude, we might be able to whittle these down by a policy or two. So any questions on really 13 and 14 are about air quality.
We'd be putting in anything about carbon neutral methods, or is that again dictated by some state agency? Seems like we haven't put too much in about, the climate crisis, et cetera.
The main contributor we have some influence over is vehicle travel, and that's going to get addressed in the circulation element. But I think also energy conservation, because generation of power results in greenhouse gases. So we're getting into it indirectly through the things that we can influence.
Okay, makes sense.
And then, of course, in every CEQA document, we have to address GHG, climate change and such. So greenhouse gas and climate change.
So is there a way to maybe add something about shade and so trees? If with climate and the heat temperatures, if we're bounded by Flannery all around us, which means we're going to have to become denser, is there a way to talk through keeping an eye on keeping the temperatures down by providing cover, trees versus just plants?
Which might help with the carbon issue as well.
Let us work on I think that would work well as a program, something, requiring within site planning. I can tell you there's a natural tension between density and trees. And I first bumped up against this as single family lots started getting smaller, but houses kept getting bigger, and front yards all of a sudden were 12 to 15 feet deep, but we were still planting red oaks in the front yards. And 6 feet from a house isn't enough room for a red oak. So all of a sudden now the street trees become big shrubs. So, but there is this tension of building denser to conserve energy and drive less, as compared to having, beautiful street trees. And it's something that I think we should probably have a discussion about, particularly street trees. And how we can have street trees that will shade roads, shade sidewalks and shade neighborhoods. So Nick, let's just put a footnote that we'll talk about vegetation and tree cover as a strategy for reducing heat sinks and climate issues.
Since we're reducing qualifiers in here in 14, can we just take out the words as needed?
Sure. If there are thresholds of significance, then we would apply them. It's not really as needed, so. You got that, Nick?
Yep, I got it.
Riffing.
Consider doing something maybe when it might be feasible. Okay. All right, onward.
And
Up, back.
For these 11, 12, 13, 14, they're covered by a lot of the state policies.
Yes,
So I'm guessing that all of this is well coordinated with the state policies and everything as well.
yeah, yes, state and, yeah. In fact, to some extent, these are a little bit belt-in suspenders.
Mhm.
In that if we didn't have these policies here, it doesn't mean the developer doesn't have to do
Yeah.
A, B, and C. But sometimes reiterating and restating
Mhm.
can be a good reminder.
Yeah, sometimes the more you say it, the more they finally, hopefully, eventually will get it.
So I don't think it's bad to reiterate,
No.
but lacking these policies, the regulations would still apply.
I'm just making sure that we're not saying one thing and the state says something else. That's. Yeah.
That is not the case.
And our policies can be more
Mhm.
restrictive than state.
Yes, they can, except in housing.
And water.
Yeah. Okay, next one.
So yeah, speaking of carbon neutral policies, we are looking at energy conservation programs for encouraging active and passive solar energy design in building and site development. And then the last two policies are looking at preserving historic and architecturally significant resources in the city, as well as archaeological resources if discovered during excavation in the city. And just following, as we just said, CEQA and other applicable state laws.
California Environmental Quality Act, and every time the city makes a decision, we have to determine whether or not CEQA applies and to what level we have to analyze. It's a big consumer of energy and time, but it protects the environment. Okay, not seeing anything on these. Moving on, I think, to the programs.
Mhm. So we have, I believe, about nearly a dozen programs. No, only about 8. So what we'll show here, the first two programs. The first one is just really addressing sensitive habitat buffer. Sensitive habitats by having a habitat buffer guidelines, and we just have here the city will review projects on a case by case basis to determine the setback requirements for sensitive habitats. So we provide some guidelines for those setback areas from the edges of perennial streams and intermittent streams, as well as sensitive habitats. And then the second program is regarding water and energy conservation, and in regards to developing and designing parks and other city facilities to incorporate water conservation and energy conservation programs and measures into the design of those facilities.
And Nick, remind me, is open space program 1, that largely came from the existing general plan, or maybe Nick or Eunice, can you remind me whether that's one that we've carried forward largely? I think it is.
I believe it is. Yeah, Eunice, you may know better than I do.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so that standards, the 50 feet, 100 foot are, you know, in the current general plan, and we've maintained them, so. And then the second program is just when we build something, make sure it's water and energy efficient. So we should be walking our talk as well. Any thoughts?
Is there a difference between open space and green space?
Yes, there is.
And that difference is?
Well, I've got to tell you, maybe this is a bias on my part. I think of green space as more park-like.
Like,
And open space may be very natural and may not be irrigated or may much of the year be brown. Did we use the term green space?
no, I just
Okay.
wondered what the difference was.
I don't think that there's a hard and fast technical difference, but that's the connotation for myself.
So the golf course at Trilogy is considered a green space.
I think that's fair. And I also would not call it open space generally.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, next.
Can we just tighten up one sentence? I think, I don't think you need to say on a case by case basis. Don't you mean the city will review projects to determine the setback requirements?
Yes, it would be on all projects, yeah, so. On a case by case basis can be removed.
Okay. Well, I removed it.
Okay, next.
The program 3 here is on preservation.
One
lands and-
problem right off the bat.
Uh-oh.
Maybe it
Oh, man.
Somebody was up late.
All right, we've had our fun, sorry, Nick.
Oh, I'm sorry that came through like that. Yeah, the spell check didn't catch that one. So yeah, this third program is dealing with parcel lines or easements should optimize resource protection. So regarding drainage corridors and wetland areas. Yeah, so this one's really looking at how the open space and the easement areas and allowed uses and maintenance responsibilities will be defined and conditioned prior to map or project approval. And then the second program here, cultural and historic resources, is just stating the city will initiate or work with other entities within the city, like the museum board and other interested local civic groups to undertake an inventory of significant structures or sites that are either deemed historic or potentially have historic character or architectural character in the community. So this would just be helpful moving forward to have as a resource for the community when you're looking at new developments and new projects in relationship to areas that have culture and historic resources.
So I'm going to make a suggestion for the group to consider. I think in program 3, we could just eliminate the first sentence because parcel lines and easements aren't what optimize resource protection. I think the rest of the statement holds together and really gets to what we're talking about, but the parcel lines and easements would then follow that as appropriate. So I think we could just lose that first sentence.
Okay.
I think in the second sentence, we don't need to say for inclusion is proposed in an open space parcel or easement.
Yeah. Is, okay, so for inclusion can also be dropped.
Okay.
Set aside. A very specific term, or is it just wetlands?
It's preserved wetlands, but I think I think it'd be wetlands. It doesn't just by virtue of the fact that the wetland is in an open space parcel or easement, it is a set aside. So I think that we could just take the word set aside out. So drainage corridor, wetland, hilltop, or other sensitive area is proposed in an open space parcel. Yeah, that's much cleaner.
Mm.
Why didn't we see this, Nick? Okay, and Judith, I think you offered to help us with our historic inventory, did you not?
I did, yeah.
Excellent.
And I didn't got to do anything about it, but I'd love to do that.
We'll look forward to working on it together. Okay, otherwise, are these good? And on the number 4, what we're really trying to get to is not qualifying for historic register. We're trying to get to those resources that make Rio Vista a special place. So. Okay, next.
Program 5, resource maintenance and management programs. So
This
here the
can-
city will,
I can
Yeah.
explain this one in
yeah,
brief.
please, yeah. Mhm.
We're going to have open space areas preserved, and we just want to make sure there's a plan that they're cared for, including funding. So with this, when Brand Ranch is developed, there's going to be a large open space set aside, and we don't want to be obligated to do the regular maintenance of that. So this is simply saying, when a project gets reviewed, we want a management plan and we want assured funding. So. Okay. Next.
So, oh,
Oops.
can we go back to program 6? Yeah. So this one is, stating we're going to continue consulting with other agencies and continuing coordination. And, with Solano County, other organizations, nonprofit organizations and landowners to maintain these open space policies and other policies such as Measure A that will continue to protect farmland in the community and in the outside areas of Rio Vista. And we give an example here on the county's right to farm ordinance.
So we have heard over and over that residents of Rio Vista love the setting. They love being a small town, what feels like a rural landscape. So this policy is speaking to that, although I don't know in reality that we're really going to do that much to preserve farmland outside of the city limits. I think this is more a nod to something we value than really direction that's going to lead staff to action. So when we look at things and see them in that light, maybe we need to question about whether it's a program we want in the general plan. We heard the message from the community, and so we can put it in. I just don't know that there's that much that the city will actively do to acquire easements for farmland outside of the city.
Since this is going to be in our general plan for the next 20-something odd years, you probably should just strike such as Measure A. I don't think it'll mean anything to anyone
Okay,
later on.
Okay.
the one caveat I might offer is there's been some discussions about organizations that are promoting regional trails, talking, regional trails from the Sierras to the Bay Area. That's an interagency coordination I think we should be engaged in. So that if we could promote a trail that passed by Rio Vista that was truly regional in scope, that's a pretty neat thing. And that's something I could see us getting behind and pushing for. So maybe we can recast this a little bit and broaden the interagency coordination focus beyond just farmland preservation. So Nick and I will work on that. Next one, Nick.
Okay, here's the last 2 policies, programs. We have here one regarding environmental design criteria. So having the city require developers to minimize the creation of engineered drainage channels that concentrate runoff and disrupt natural drainage patterns. So that goes into some of the themes we were talking about earlier with promoting, view corridors and open space that is visually attractive and really responds to what the citizens of Rio Vista want to see. And then also continuing to participation in the review and oversight of the National Flood Insurance Program. So this includes, looking at the FEMA model ordinances and coordinating with them on the flood insurance maps.
This is something that happens at the staff level and you as appointed elected officials don't really get involved with, but we have to regularly review FEMA maps and work with FEMA staff. So this is more for staff. Thoughts on these last two programs? Great. Next slide. Nick, you want to give a little update on Fair and Peers efforts?
Sure. So Fair and Peers, they have been using, I believe, a sub-consultant, another party, to look at roadway segments and doing counts of traffic along certain segments in the city. And that information has been collected and is in the process of being analyzed here to help with the writing of the circulation element and other aspects of the plan. They're also evaluating cut-through traffic in the city for travelers on Highway 12, trying to avoid congestion and kind of looking at where movement is happening. What roads they're traveling on to do cut through in areas. So that is also being looked at this time. Paul has been working, and I as well, on the TAZ boundaries. I think we've talked about this before, the traffic analysis zones that the city is divided in, and we've looked at those areas and have made some modifications based on those areas that have been provided to us, kind of looking at how the city's divided up and where the development patterns are. So we can look at that data for existing residential units and kind of look at where we are today by those areas and then project residential units in 2045 so we can look at where the demand and travel will occur throughout the city. And Paul, I think you probably have a little more to say about this.
Well, just in brief, it's really a pleasure working with Fair and Peers. They're a great organization. The traffic model that they were given had these kind of odd boundaries of little zones that didn't follow neighborhoods and didn't really reflect the patterns of Rio Vista. And we said, hey, can you fix those? And they said, sure. So they're creating a new traffic model that really is specifically tailored for Rio Vista rather than just a small town that happened to nest in a countywide model. So we're going to have a model that's tailored specifically to the city. We're also, the regional model is like year 2015 to 2035, but we're shifting all of that. So our base year will be 2022 and our horizon year will be 2045. So again, we're coming up with a model that's going to be really representative of Rio Vista and of our existing conditions right now. So Fair and Peers is now moving into that phase where they're doing a lot of crunching and building the traffic model. And then as they get this work done, they can start analyzing what the outcomes are like. And we'll also be looking at build out of the city, not just 2045. So what happens at full build out of the city instead of, as I mentioned, our 2045 projection probably won't take up all of our land. We'll have a more aggressive full build out to understand how the community will work. And we'll probably also be modeling in increased traffic on Highway 12 because Highway 12 pass through is unfortunately not going to get less over time. And so we need to be aware of that.
So on this circulation element, does that take into account, this obviously is about traffic movement, but does it also include people? pathway systems?
Absolutely, non-vehicular, or I
Okay.
think we now call it alternative transportation
Okay.
modes. So, yeah.
Because I
the
feel like right
bu-
now we're, in a-
Bikes and peds, yeah.
yeah, because I feel like we're kind of in a pissing battle, if you will, with Caltrans or STA, because we don't really have a plan and we can't show to them that, hey, this is our plan and you're not fitting within that plan. We had talked about, and I know that Tom had talked about this swale, that when they're gonna get rid of the verticality on Highway 12, that we should have safe passage underneath that culvert, if you will.
Yeah.
And they ignore us. And then as well, when we talked about safe passage across Highway 12, right at the foot of the bridge, they blow us off on that as well. Excuse my language. But that's what they do. And it would be, if we actually had a plan, pathway plan, then we could actually present it to them. And I think that would be pretty powerful.
We will have a clear citywide non-vehicular transportation plan. We've been very good at programming for a limited horizon, certain projects. But what we haven't been very good at is coming up with the whole system. And so that's where we want to go with Fair and Pierce.
Okay, and then when do we think that plan's going to be done? That push, that element?
We'll have to check in with Fair and Pierce. They're very much focused on getting the technical aspects of the vehicular transportation, because that's very complex, and the Highway 12 options is going to be one of the more complicated efforts they undertake, but we can ask and get an update on the pedestrian bike plan work. So Nick, can we make sure to have an update on that for the next meeting?
Yes, we can do that.
And that's my concern of the timing of this, how that rationalizes with what Caltrans is telling us they're going to do. If this research that Fair and Pierce does doesn't align with what Caltrans is proceeding with right now, I mean, how do we rationalize that?
How do we?
It's just,
rationalize?
I mean, we can have this plan to say how we want it to go, but if Caltrans is proceeding with work that doesn't really align with, the general plan that we're trying to pull together here.
Well, let me say this. We'll push Fair and Pierce to move as quickly as possible on the non-vehicular, because I don't think it's terribly affected by the more technical analysis of vehicle circulation. We know where the roads are. We know where they're going to be. I think, they just haven't gotten the marching orders that this is urgent. And then that could be the tool that our leaders can go to Caltrans and have our best chance at influencing them. I think the working group made a very good point that it would be cheaper to get the pedestrian undercrossing constructed now with the improvements. It'll be much cheaper than to do it later, but it's going to be more expensive to do it than to not do it. And so Caltrans will probably be looking at, well, that's another $2 million or whatever it is. I don't know.
Well, I think some of the plans we talked about, actually, I don't think are going to be more expensive. They just have it set in their mind. There's going to be a crosswalk at this position right at the entrance of the bridge or the exit of the bridge, when there could be a safe passage right along the wraparound that comes down to the promenade. So I think they're just like this right now. So if we could show it on a circulation plan, I think it'd be powerful.
I think it's going to be an uphill battle if we can't get them to move that crosswalk. I don't think they're going to really consider anything else that we want to do at this point. I mean, it seems like they've kind of dug their heels in, and this is a plan. If you don't take it, then we won't do it. That was kind of what they told us before.
Well,
But we'll keep saying it.
yeah, what they're doing on Highway 12 is positive. It's absolutely good investment, and I don't think we want to say, don't do anything if you can't do the perfect solution, but I think there's also a space there to have a very serious conversation about improving the plan. But I think the city will need to be able to bring something to the table. And STA has already brought money to the table for the project. So I mean, there's some realities here of funding the project and what's allocated, that this is definitely something we'll have to lean into pretty hard. At politically speaking, technically speaking, on all levels. Otherwise, you're right, Caltrans has a plan, they're gonna follow it.
Well, I just think as well, there's the possibility we could fund these things or find alternative funding sources for instance, safe streets. So if we're doing that culvert, that's going to go underneath the highway, they might say it cost $1 million, that's all we're going to spend. And if we do the improvements, it's going to be cost 1.5. Well, maybe we could find that 0.5,
Right. Yeah.
right?
So Nick, we need to have a conversation with Fair and Peers and, you know,
Okay.
urgency, particularly related to the undercrossing on Highway 12, because that's an opportunity now that will go away.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
All right. I'll contact them tomorrow.
Okay, next slide. We're at that great next to last slide before we say get out of here. We'll be back on the first. We'll be talking about public facilities. I hope we're having a discussion starting with Public Works. Hopefully we'll be ready for that. We're also working on economic development, so we'll see which of those elements is ready to come forward with goals, policies, and programs. But then you'll also get the third element of open space and conservation. And Nick, we need to start transferring these into final draft form. I guess maybe final draft form isn't the right term, but
Mhm.
fully formatted drafts, so the group can start to see how the document's going to lay out.
Right, like we did with the Parks and Recreation element
Right.
last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what's on tap for next month.
Anything else? Anybody?
Not from staff.
Okay. Edwin says meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.